Good afternoon. I am glad you decided to tune into the Jenny Jones podcast show today, where being a good steward with your money is how you win when it seems like you are losing. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Jones Education and on Twitter at Jones Education. Under the My Retirement Exit series today, we will look at the shift from accumulation to distribution. As always, we will end the show with a homework assignment that will help you win when it seems like you are losing.
This podcast is brought to you by MyRetirementExit.com, home of the Retirement Readiness Report Card. Class is in session.
I'd like to thank you all for joining me today on our podcast show. The shift from accumulation to distribution. The shift from accumulation to distribution. You know, in life we plan or prepare for changes. Some of those changes we can see coming, and some of those changes we can't see coming. And I was having a conversation with one of my workshop attendees from my last Jones Education retirement workshop. I think it was back in March. I think it was the second week in March. But anyway, as she asked me, she asked me a very good question. Her question was, in your opinion, Mr. Jones, what do you think is the first thing you need to do in regards to retirement? And I was like, well, the first thing you need to do is you must prepare your mindset for the shift. And and she says, well, what do you mean by that? I mean, my mindset has already started to shift because of my tolerance at work. It's just not the same anymore. I was, as we both shared a laugh, I said in all seriousness, I think that is the most common theme amongst the clients that I sit down with in preparation for retirement today. The shift is not just about your mindset at work, but about your overall retirement planning strategy. You see, when you are working and producing an income to pay for household goods and services and car insurances and those types of things, your retirement funds, whether it be a pension or a 401k plan, is set up to accumulate wealth or savings. So let's call that the accumulation phase. Sure, we may have involved meeting with an advisor or the retirement benefits specialist at workplace. Even though workplace retirement benefits specialists are not licensed, they can give some pretty, decent advice. I'm not going to pick on those guys, but they are good at pointing you in the right direction, but only if you know what direction that is. Should I be going south? Should I be going north? They're like, oh, you want to go north? We'll take you north. Oh, you want to go south? We'll take you south. So, if you have a question concerning about paying taxes, then they may give you a brochure. Hey, here's a brochure on taxes. Okay, well, I mean, if you have a question about Social Security, they may say, well, okay, well, here's the Social Security website, and here's a brochure on Social Security. And, that may work well, but for liability purposes, they are pretty much limited in advice that they can give you. But the shift is about proper preparation and moving to that next phase. I call this phase in my book the distribution phase. So you have the accumulation phase, then you have the distribution phase. And distribution really means that now that I've accumulated, now how do I turn on the faucets? Which faucets should I turn on first? Should I turn on a Social Security faucet? Should I turn on my 401k faucet? Should I turn on my Roth faucet? That is the distribution phase, and knowing which ones to turn on. But this is a very different phase. For all intents and purposes, a more difficult phase than the aforementioned accumulation phase. You see, the accumulation phase, it's usually properly balanced with household income versus expenses, and you can pretty much set it and forget it. After you handle when your income comes in and then you pay out for your expenses and you save for retirement, that is accumulation. and you can set it and forget it. I do not recommend setting and forget it, but accumulating wealth and or retirement savings at a certain rate over a period of time with compound interest, can net you a pretty good sum of money. Okay, so, but for example, if you can average, say, a return of about 10% over 7+ years or around 7.2 years, your principal or the amount of money you started with could essentially double at that same period, over that same period. Now, getting an average return of compounding interest at 10% over that period, well, that's another story. Nevertheless, you would still be accumulating. If you are in some kind of pension or retirement plan over a period of time, you should be able to build and put together a nice retirement bucket. But the shift to the distribution phase is a phase where more planning will need to be done. So the distribution phase, you can't just pick that up and say, now I'm in a distribution phase, so I'll do this and I'll do that. Yeah, sure, planning for the accumulation phase, it is important. It is important, but it is not as important as the distribution phase. But let's face it, all you had to really do during that phase was to pretty much stay employable. If you stayed employable, no matter the size, big or small, you can put a bucket together. But life happened, you got married, you had kids or 2.1 kids. That's what the statistics say. And, so you were able to get married and you're fortunate, you took time off. And so what happened then after that is you took time off and you took time off to take the kids to daycare and you had to take them to preschool and you were fortunate. You were fortunate enough to do that. And my hat's off to you if you're allowed to do that. My wife, she stayed at home with the kids for about a year or two. And we were fortunate to be able to do that. But she had a pension. So she was still able to keep her money in there and it was still accumulating. She didn't have, let's say she had to leave jobs or something like that, it would not be able to accumulate. But one of the things she needed to do was if you don't change jobs or if you do change jobs, your money still is pretty much working for you. Now, if you left your money at an old employer, your money may or may not be working as hard for you, and it may be on the sidelines altogether. I'll cover that in another podcast entitled Never Leave Your Money Alone. But I digress. So listen, what I'm trying to say to you is money had time to get it right. You had the time to get it right. It's the time value of money. If you make a mistake, if you lost money, say the economy had a bad 2 or 3 years, you could just work another 2 or 3 years to make that money up. So you have time to make it up. You still had time to get it right. Okay. But when you move into the distribution phase, well, the stakes are much higher. The stakes are much higher when it comes to the distribution phase, and I will cover that more, and I will tell you why after the break.
This podcast is brought to you by MyRetirementExit.com, home of the Retirement Readiness Report Card.
Thanks for coming back, joining us here at the Jenny Jones Podcast, where we're talking about the shift, accumulation, and distribution. So I remember back, I'm supposed to tell you why, but I remember back when I went to visit my mom several years ago and I showed up at her job and she went from desk to desk and people was like, oh, that's the person sitting on your desk. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And I thought they were pretty nice. Everyone was offering me food and snacks and donuts and all that other kind of stuff. Because we lived in 2 different states, I'd never met any of these people before, but my mom had worked there for years. And I thought after meeting them, I said, man, they're pretty cool. I said that to myself. So I was having dinner with my mom and dad later that night. And I said, Mom, your coworkers are pretty cool. My mom said, son, let me tell you something. And I'm going to tell you, when she told me this, it really stuck with me and it resonated. This was probably over 10 years ago. And I was a lot younger then. And I didn't think of it like I think of it now. But and this resonates with me this very day. She says, son, I work for people that are younger than me, and I work alongside people that are younger than me. And I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. But it was true. She said, every new hire that we hire, they're getting younger and younger. And I often say to myself, I don't know if I'm ready. And I say, well, Mom, what does that mean? She says, my tolerance, my patience, that actually says that I am ready, or that I'm really, really close to retirement. But she didn't really know. She didn't know if she did all the things she needed to do. Sure, she had a pension because she worked for the state for a long period of time. But was she really ready? Did she actually really know? Okay, before the break, we spoke about the stakes of the distribution phase being very high. You know, I'll only get into a few more reasons here as I cover in great detail in my upcoming book. Listen, I have taught workshops in New Orleans, San Diego, Oakland. I've had attendees as far as Alaska. And the sentiment is the same. It's the same as the young lady that I met at my workshop a couple of months ago. And it's the same as my mom's that she shared with me several years ago. No one wants to have to go back to work, right? That's the primary reason why they exited the first place, because the tolerance had changed. You know, as you get older, your patience change. You know, it's like when you have grandkids over, it's like, oh, they can only stay for 2 hours. They can only stay for a day, you know, and you don't want to have them stay for anything more than a couple of hours. Your tolerance changes. And that's the same in the workplace. So that's why the stakes are higher in the distribution phase. Okay. And that was the reason why I say that. Let me ask you a question. Can you see yourself being a greeter at a large retailer, and, you know, you run into an old young coworker that you used to work with, and they're picking out a Halloween costume for their kids or something, and then they ask you for help, you know, not recognizing that you're the actual greeter? That can be a pretty strange situation that you would run into. And I don't recommend that, by the way. But the shift is all about proper preparation. It's all about proper preparation of the distribution phase. I have a question for you to ponder really quick. Before I give you the next point in the distribution phase, the question is, have you ever retired? I mean, you know, you may meet other people in other occupations. Let's see if retirement was an occupation. And you meet an accountant who says, oh, well, yeah, you know, we have all credits and all debits. You know, we get that. And then you meet attorneys who says, yeah, well, their defense was this or their defense was that. But they pretty much can share these same stories. Retirement is different. I have not met a client or met with a couple. No one couple or no retirement client is the same. They all have different stories. They all have different challenges. And so really, if retirement was an occupation, no one would know what to do. It's like when you apply for a job, you know, they have, you know, the list of qualifications, and then the employer says, well, these are the most desirable skills. But retirement, no one's been there before unless you've been in it yourself. And, wow, that sounds like an upcoming podcast. I'm going to have to write that down here. But listen, my point is no one going into retirement for the first time has ever retired before. That right there raises the stakes higher in the distribution phase. You know, the accumulation phase is all about increasing income by going to a job, you know. And if you know nothing else in the accumulation phase, you know that you need to save for retirement, and that requires income, and that requires employment. Okay? Closing points will be coming up in the next 6 period after this message. Have you ever said the following words to your kids? Money does not grow on trees. And they say to you after looking up from their favorite search engine on their smartphone, oh yeah, actually it does, Mom. It's made of rag paper, which consists of 75% cotton and 25% linen blend. And Mom, that means actually money does grow on trees. The Jones Education 4.0 Finance Series for teens actually can teach your kids about money. This one-day workshop teaches kids about preparing a monthly budget, teen taxes, teen savings, check writing, giving back or donating, and their first 401k. To learn more about those upcoming classes, visit www.thejoneseducation.com/programs. Thank you for hanging around at the Jenny Jones podcast today. Not only did you stay in class, but you made it to sixth period. No one cut class, hopefully. School will be out soon, though. But I thought it would be important to share this period that a lot goes into the shift. Another part of the shift is recognizing where you are before you actually make the shift. I produced a quick read white paper on the power of 5 and why 5 years is the absolute minimum time to prepare for retirement. I mean, and you can actually get that if you send an email to info@thejoneseducation.com. You can send me an email if you want that white paper. That's info@thejoneseducation.com. Even if your window is closer to 5, I don't want to alarm anyone, any of my listeners, but if your window is even closer to 5, you still have time. If it's 2 or 3 years away, you will have to put a very tight plan together with minimal mistakes, and you can probably still get it accomplished. But most of my clients have come to me, if they're within the 5-year window, I always hear the following, if I'd have known about the life income benefit rider, if I'd had my benefits correctly before my spouse passed away, those types of things, that's all in the preparation and getting ready for the distribution phase. Before I made that selection, just different things like that. Remember when you blew your first 401k as a 20-something-year-old buying a fresh new red Pontiac Firebird or a motorcycle? Yeah, raising my hand. Yeah, I remember I did that. I blew my first 401k because I didn't know. And that's how you don't have that option when you get ready to retire. You do not get a do-over. There are too many risks involved. So many that you would not even believe. Increasing health suspicions. Part D, long-term care issues. As you already know, political risk is one of them. As you can see from the climate and the political, that healthcare is changing. That's actually changing on an annual basis. All right. So, in fact, most surveys say that most people, 65% of their retirement income will come from Social Security. Do you know what that even means to you? Do you even know when you should start taking Social Security? What if you had to go back to work and you already elected to take Social Security? So say you had to go back as a greeter. I mean, your part-time job could cost you nearly 60 to 7% in Social Security taxes. Too far many risks to get into. Sixth period class is over. Please tune it back in for our next show on the Jenny Jones podcast. Thank you for joining me. Where being a good steward today is how you win when it seems like you are losing. Look for more education after the show. Join the discussion about this podcast, tips, discounts, workshop dates, and more on Facebook at thefacebook.com/Jones Education. Don't want to miss out on anything? Sign up for our newsletter at info@thejoneseducation.com. Your homework assignment is to start visualizing retirement and what it means and what your shift will look like. Until next time, class is dismissed.